I'm delighted to welcome now to the EBnet studio here at the IRFA 2025 concert, Carina Wessels of Alexforbes. Carina, welcome.
Thanks, Leon. Great to be here.
Carina, you are one of the speakers at this year's conference on an important topic that seems to be a theme that's going through the conference. Can you share with us a little bit about what you're going to be speaking about?
So what I'll specifically be touching on is the transition from ESG to impact and why it actually matters for retirement funds. I think, as you said, we've heard in all of the sessions this morning, including Geraldine's opening, that is definitely a theme. But I think the difficulty is, how to make it real and what does it really look like in the retirement fund industry. So I'll also specifically touch on some examples of how that can be done and how trustees can actually look at impact and integrate that into their decision making.
Carina, the experience in Europe was when ESG came about and it quickly evolved into impact. A lot of it was good marketing speak. Now we're going through a similar phase in South Africa. You hear a lot, but how real is it, and how do we assess as trustees whether indeed impact is real in what's on the tin?
I think that's a critical part of the conversation, Leon, and I think to a certain extent that's what has gone wrong with ESG and the traditional view on ESG, is that you get the rating agencies that give you a double B or a triple A, and you think that must mean that the business is massively sustainable or that they, fabulous business. But that isn't necessarily the case. It's a measure of an input, and yes, it's important. You need to look at those components, but that's where moving to impact is the differential in really looking at what is the real world impacts and not just purely what is the input. And there, what we're specifically doing is we're using a tool called Paragon Impact, and that really assesses be it your portfolio or your company against the Sustainable Development Goals, and it can show you, on a general basis, how do you compare against others in that context as well. It's measurable, and that's the key thing around impact, is that it's actually measurable and quantifiable. Whereas, with the ESG stuff, it's as I said, ticking a box. You have a policy in place or you're disclosing something, but you're not actually measuring the outcomes at all.
So I've always said ESG are a set of principles that will help you ultimately achieve good behaviors and perhaps impact at the end of the day. But for impact, it has to be intentional. You have
Absolutely.
to have a specific outcome you're aiming to achieve, and you need to be able to measure that and report on that at the end of the day. So is that something that Paragon assists you with?
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the latest visuals that's extremely powerful for trustees is to specifically look at the comparison between return and the impact measure. And again, it's impact based on the Sustainable Development Goals. And to be able to see that, you don't need to give up return in order to have impact. But I think what's also important is that, considering impact and looking at impact doesn't necessarily equate to impact investing. And I know a lot of trustees may not necessarily be ready in their minds to transition to that. I think they should, but they may not yet be. But at least measuring and monitoring impact, gives you that understanding of really what the positive and negative impacts are, and you can communicate those to members.
So traditionally, people tend to see impact as being something that perhaps you can achieve in the private markets world, because it's grassroots development. You should create jobs or build shopping centers or whatever. But at the end of the day, impact can be as equally applied to the listed markets or the public markets, in the sense that what are the firms you supporting achieving in their own right. So do you see impact as a slice of a pension fund or as a philosophy for a pension fund?
It's absolutely a philosophy. And as I said, it's also about understanding whether there's negative impacts potentially. So it's not making an investment decision necessarily for a positive impact, but it's understanding in your portfolio of assets, some may have a positive impact, some may have a negative impact, and what's that aggregate view of your portfolio as a whole, and what does that mean for perhaps divesting of certain underlying assets. Or otherwise, what does that mean for your stewardship activities in terms of encouraging, positive behavior? So absolutely a philosophy, and in fact, in a broader equity space can have more meaningful impact considering the quantums that we're talking about. So, it doesn't mean, as an example, that you need to divest of a Sasol, because they also have positive impacts, from a creating, jobs perspective, even, sometimes, an equity perspective. But without knowing what that looks like, you actually operate in a vacuum in terms of your impact decisions.
So trustees are faced these days with a whole range of new complex sort of themes that are coming through, and also new regulations. Cybersecurity, suddenly we're having to become cybersecurity experts. Impact, again, for trustees is going to sound a bit like, whoa, how do I deal with all of that? How am I meant to understand all of those kind of things? But at the end of the day, impact is something that's real to all of us. And the biggest risk that trustees face is not just making sure their members retire comfortably, but retiring to an environment where they can live a comfortable retirement at the end of the day. So getting around the concept of impact, it's important that trustees perceive or understand that they should receive good returns. It's not philanthropy.
Absolutely.
And secondly, ultimately, it is about managing risk. It's actually one of the ways trustees can really manage risk.
Absolutely, and I think if you don't look at the outcomes, and if you don't look at the implementation part of ESG, you're actually missing an entire new risk of a lack of implementation. So you may think that you're managing the ESG risks on the financial returns, but there's a whole component of risk that you're actually not managing. And obviously we've seen that ESG in its current form hasn't created a more sustainable world, or a world worth retiring into. And that absolutely is what needs to happen. And I think a key thing that came out in, I think, some of the discussions this morning, or that frustration of what do I do as a trustee, is that we need to give different mandates to the asset managers. An asset manager that just tells you an ESG story is telling you a part of the story. They're not giving you the complete picture and the complete context that you need to think about.
But even as a multi-manager, using those ESG principles in your due diligence process allows you to get to know that asset manager way better. How in tune are they with the companies that they're investing in, and so on? And it actually makes it a very fruitful discussion to have in that assessment process.
Absolutely. So for the first time, we're able to look at, be it the return of a certain asset manager as well as the impact of that asset manager. And you can see, I think, as I said earlier on, that you don't need to give up, return for impact firstly, but you can also see, in that balance, how meaningful it is in terms of how you engage with the asset managers if you have that information. Without that information, you see a perspective, the financial return perspective, but you actually don't see the rest of the perspective at all.
So I'm so glad that you guys are approaching it from a holistic perspective at the end of the day. Otherwise, we tend to box things too easily. And I actually do really believe in this philosophical approach to how we approach investments at the end of the day. And I actually believe that's the role of a fiduciary, is to keep that full picture in mind.
Absolutely. And I think, one never wants to go the negative conversation, but, the risk of greenwashing is real. Mm-hmm. And, it's not something that just happens elsewhere in the world. It really is, arguably part of TCF in terms of how trustees think about communication. And to ensure that what they communicate to members are actually real around the products that they invest in, and how they think about it more holistically.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to your talk tomorrow. If I get a chance to leave this room and actually go listen to a talk. You've got a stand here.
Yes,
every year.
Yes,
you guys are proud supporters of IRFA. Perhaps you can just comment on what we can expect to see there.
Yeah, so please come and visit the stand. I think we want to engage with everyone, and this really is about building a collective network that wants to create a world that all of us want to retire into. And I think Geraldine set up the whole 2 days fantastically this morning in terms of once again reminding us of the critical role that the individuals in this room can play in shaping a future, not just for retirees, but for different South Africa. And it's very exciting to be part of that conversation, and it's exciting to engage with individuals that see that as important and part of what they do.
Yeah, well, hooray to that! That's all I can say. And you're welcome at any point in time to get that message out via EBnet as well. It's something we believe in strongly, and that we definitely want to nudge the market in that direction.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, and well done on all the great work that you guys do.
Cheers. Thank you. That's Carina Wessels of Alexforbes.
you.